welcome back to the See You on the Trail podcast. My name is Hitch. I will be the guy talking to you in the beginning, and then we'll get on with the next one. But you can call me Alan. You can call me whatever you want, as long as you listen to the podcast. I really don't care. Make sure, first, whatever area you're actually listening or watching this with, give it a thumbs up, give it a like. I seem to have not shown up on the top 10 off-road podcast area. So make sure you guys give it a like, give it a share on social media, either Twitter, Instagram, wherever you want to do it. We would appreciate it. But I know it's been a little bit since I've done a podcast. I'm one that kind of runs off the cuff, and we haven't been able to get anybody scheduled in for a little bit. So it's been about a month, but I hope you enjoy this next podcast. It's going to be one of my favorites. We spent over an hour talking, and that usually doesn't happen. It usually runs 30 to 45 minutes, but I didn't want to stop it because it was going very, very well. And so I hope you enjoy that. That's in this next segment. But anyway, what are you guys' thoughts? Are you guys ready for nationals? Comment on Facebook or on YouTube, I believe, are the only two places you can actually comment on this. And comment who you think is going to win nationals. Nationals coming up in 2 weeks, I believe, 2 or 3 weeks. So comment on it. Tell us who you think is going to win it. My money is going to be on Lauren, Jason Scherer, Eric Miller, just the usual suspects. I did it. I enjoy watching all of them race. I'd like to see somebody from way down below, some of the more minor league racers. I'd like to see somebody like that come up and do it. What'd you think about our last podcast we did with Jay Aiken? Aiken. I'm sorry, Jay. I'm really sorry about that. It's Jay Aiken. I've always called him the wrong name, and it's my fault. I'm reading on Facebook, and that's what happens whenever I actually read, which I should probably quit reading. But anyway, needless to say, we are here to talk to one of the biggest racers in Ultra 4 history. He started back in 2001, 2002, doing Cal Rocks and U-Rock, and he progressed. He was he's the only 3-time winner of KOH, and he's also the only back-to-back winner. He won the last 2 years. His name is Jason Scherer, and Jason and his brother are good friends of mine. We've known each other for years. Very, very cool people. And to sit down and talk to Jason about all the stuff that he started out doing is really, really neat. So I'm just going to go ahead, quit rambling, shut my mouth, and let this video roll, because it's going to, or this audio or video, you may see a little bit of both, depending on what platform. Remember, guys, we're on Apple Podcast. Anchor is where we're based out of. We'll have it on YouTube. We'll have it on Facebook. It's 10 different platforms. And so, although we may not be top 10 in Apple Podcast, you got to think we're spread around everywhere. So we actually just want to get the information out as soon as we possibly can and to the masses. So anyway, enjoy the conversation, and I will see you at the end of this conversation. And hopefully you guys will enjoy it and listen to all of it and share it with everybody that you know on social media. So my name's Hitch. I'll see you in about 45 minutes or so, and enjoy. Well, today we have somebody that he's a one-of-a-kind kind of guy. His name is Jason Scherer, 3-time back-to-back for 2 of them, KOH champions. Jason, how you doing, man?
Hey, I'm doing great. It's good to be on. Thanks for having me.
Oh, anytime, man. We've been hit and miss trying to catch up, and we've actually finally done it, and we're taking the time out to do the podcast. Let's go ahead and start from the beginning, man. What got you into off-roading and off-road racing?
That's a good question. I think that off-roading was more like going camping with my friend's family as a kid. We had a best friend, and his family had a Jeep, and he let me ride dirt bikes with him all the time. So we just became like dirt bike kids. And when we were, I think, 12 years old, his parents took us through the Barrett Lake Jeep Trail. We rode our dirt bikes, and they took their Jeep. And it was hard, I was like on a XR 100 trying to get through that trail. I just remember a few sections of it still where I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get this dirt bike up here, and made it through the trail, camped out that night. And, we sat up against those granite rocks that had been sitting in the sun all day. When it got cold out, it's like, it's close to 8,000 feet up there. And it's cold at night always, but the rocks were warm. We laid up against the granite rocks and, watched the stars. We drank hot Tang, believe it or not, while the adults had beverages around the campfire. And I was like, dude, this is rad. And so it became very apparent for me when I was 16 what the first car was going to be. I wanted a Jeep so we could go do the same stuff. And it's crazy. I still have the same Jeep and took my kids camping in it just the other day.
Yeah, where's you said Barrett Lake? Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's one of the trails that's kind of near where the Rubicon is. So you got the Rubicon, and then on the other side of the highway is Ford Ice Jeep Trail, which is where my cabin's like right next to, so I can go wheeling out of there. And Barrett Lake's a trail it used to be open a lot more, but it's tricky because there's seasonal closures in the summer for the water in the valleys and everything that run off into the meadows. And so they only open it for a short period of time. So it's not as well known as some of the other trails, but, super good wheeling trail and just beautiful. And then, I like going wheeling to get to the campground and everything. And then you can go hike up to where an airplane crashed, like an actual Army airplane. And I went up there just a few years ago with my co-driver and a friend of mine, Phil Paziak, and we actually took one of the big pieces of the airplane and we picked it up, and it still had the big star like you'd find on the side of it's kind of like the heritage you see on some of the race cars that try to be like the Bombers. It was still perfectly intact, and we put it back just the way we found it so that it would be preserved. But it's really cool to go for those hikes up there and nice. Do fun stuff while you're camping instead of just sitting around the campfire drinking beer.
Yeah, well, I mean, you did this when you were younger as a teenager, and what was your first motorcycle, I guess?
So that's a good question. I had parents that weren't like, didn't want me to have dirt bikes. My mom's like, hey, if you want a dirt bike, you got to buy your own when you turn 18, but you're not going to have one at my house. So I rode my buddy's dirt bikes all the time, and he got me super into it. And then obviously when you're 18, you can't afford to buy a dirt bike. So, I started working, and I worked, basically probably, I went to college for 1 year, or actually 1.5 years. And then my dad called and he said, hey, he had started a new company and he needed help. And so he's like, can you come home from college and help me for a little bit? So I did. And the drill, like you go to work and you start making money and you're like, okay, I can buy cool stuff. And, it was a great little, time to go riding. And so I started riding dirt bikes like every weekend. I bought an RM250. The guy that was a friend of my girlfriend's was a professional motorcycle racer. He was doing all the GNCC races, mm-hmm. And he was a multi-time champion, Rodney Smith. And so we would go riding at Stony Ford and places like that. And, it was cool because he's actually a big influencer. Like Steve Hatch was his teammate, and we all lived locally and we were all friends and everything. But Rodney Smith was just, I mean, dude, I remember when he got some new bikes from Suzuki, and they were like DR 350s. They were kind of like crappy moto bikes, but they were dual sports. And he got two of them, and he's like, hey, you want to go ride these? I'm like, sure. And so I'm whipping through the woods in this thing, and it's like a tank, right? Inverted fork. It's terrible, like from a performance standpoint. But I'm pushing it as hard as I could, and he comes alongside me through the woods, like not on the trail, but through the woods, and buzzes by me, and all of a sudden the bike stops. And I'm like, I'm giving it gas, and it's going, brah. I'm like, what the hell is wrong? And he stops like 50 feet in front of me, and he takes the keys, and he throws them back at me. He had reached over while we was ripping through the woods, grabbed the keys out of the ignition and turned the bike off. I was like, oh my God, you're that fast. Like to be that much better, but it showed you, like if you're really going to try to be that good, you got to be, able to do stuff like that. And, I can barely, at that time I could barely keep up on the trail. He's off the trail through the woods grabbing stuff off. It was like, damn, you know. So, but that was my first bike, was an RM250, and then I didn't go too long until I was riding dirt bikes with the same friend that got me into the Jeep stuff, and his mom had an old trials bike, and we got it started after a long day of riding up in the mountains, and we decided, you know, we were like literally drinking beers and got this bike started, and then started kind of doing wheelies over a log, and then a couple of rocks in a log, and then getting into it. And like I said, we were, you know, both working and everything, so we made a deal that night that we both go buy new trials bikes. And you know, he got into it a little bit, but I was hooked, like hook, line, and sinker. That trials bike, that was my jam. And you know, I was competing in the Sacramento pit, like right out of the gate. It was like, okay, I want to go out and, you know, get good at this stuff and then go compete. So I started competing, like really heavily in it.
Yeah.
And, you know, moved my way up the ranks in it, and I loved it. And then a friend of mine, Bob Rice, he said, hey, I'm doing this, you know, all along I was in a Jeep club and we'd go wheeling, but there was no competitions, right? This was like the late 90s, right? Like 96, 97, 98, all
Gotcha.
that area. I was, you know,
Right.
riding 4 times a week and 5 times a week, whatever, you know, going to the track on the weekdays and then riding in the woods on the weekends and stuff. And he said, hey, would you come do this rock crawling competition with me? I need somebody that understands, you know, how the gates work and how, you know, like points work for like a dab on a trials bike is when you put your foot down, but it's the same as like if you back up, you know, they used to take a point if you back up on the Jeep stuff.
Yeah, kind of like we rock. Yeah,
spotter.
I got you.
Yeah, and I was like, dude, I'll be your spotter. It'll be fun, you know. So we drove to like Farmington, New Mexico, I think was the first one I went to with them, and we competed, you know, against Tracy Jordan and Don Robbins and all these, you know, guys that were like the top guys in the sport right then, you know, instantly. And with my friend Jeff Mello, who, you know, was in my Jeep club. And
that's a name I haven't heard in a long time. Jeff Mello. Wow.
Yeah. Jeff's one of my best buddies in the world, dude.
That's awesome.
You know, he's got like so many wins in that, but he was in a different class. He was in the stock mod class, and we were in like the unlimited class or whatever, and we didn't mean to be. We just happened to have had, I think at the time, if you had aftermarket suspension, you had to race the other class. We didn't know that when we showed up, so we were in like a YJ with 35-inch tires, and we're competing against, you know, Tracy Jordan with 44-inch tires and rear steer.
Right.
And I think we actually got the best score in a couple of obstacles, which was like, okay, we can do this, right? And I was hooked on that as well. Took the same Jeep that I had from when I was 16 and started, you know, cutting it up and turning it into a competition Jeep. And the next year, I started doing the Cal Rock series with Big Rich.
Yeah.
And
I didn't know Big Rich was part of Cal Rocks. I didn't know that. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Big Rich was Cal Rocks. Yeah, it was before Glenn took it back over, and for a period of time, it was big. And he, you know, had these events. We had one at an event down kind of in the Apple Valley, Johnson Valley area, like at a kind of a weird like little place right off the side of the road. We all drive by it all the time when we're going out to the Hammers, but I wasn't at the Hammers this first one. And I think, you know, I got last place. Like I literally think I got last place at the event. I had a 304 V8 with a carburetor. The exhaust wouldn't fit when I sprung it over, so it was like open headers, didn't run very well, so it sounded awesome. You know, terrible like T18 with like a regular, you know, Dana 20 transfer case, and the gearing was too tall, the thing was too short, like nothing was really good for the competition side of it at all, but I had it, right? So, you know, and it started like all the stuff though, like I needed to learn how to build a cage, and I needed to learn how to weld, and I bought like the steel do-it-yourself beadlock kit, and you know, welded them up in my driveway, and like I think 3 out of 4 of them leaked. So my buddy from down the street, Dave, came by, and he's like, let me show you how to do it. So he's teaching me how to weld. And you know, that one Jeep, like that I still have to this day, went from that to like, all right, I want to get more serious about this. And I really liked the fabrication side. You know, I enjoyed it, and it was fun to learn, right? There was Nobody in my family, not really my group of friends that were into building stuff at that time. You know, a lot's changed since then, but like at that time, it wasn't like the thing to do. You know, there was shops that people went to, but it wasn't do it yourself. And so I actually signed up and went to the Lincoln Electric Welding School in Cleveland and learned how to like TIG weld. Came home, Jeff Mello bought a tubing bender, brought it over to my house, and I built up a cage out of chromoly. And it wasn't the prettiest thing ever, but it was fun to do.
That's awesome.
And, you know, I remember going to Farmington for the super crawl that year and doing well, but like making friends with a lot of people. That was like 2002, I think. 2001 was the last event at Donner Ski Ranch. My Jeep was all done. I had put a fuel injected motor in it and, you know, 5-speed, like more traditional manual and an Atlas. And just the little details, you know, getting the cage in it, getting the seats and seat belts mounted right, and, you know, all the little stuff. And we went out there and we won the Donner event. So that was our first win, was like the last event of the same season that we started and got last. So like we made a big leap, you know, and that year, like we went to Supercrawl. I saw Tiny, I think, like in the parking lot and was like, oh my God, that's badass. Like that thing is crazy. And I remember people walking by and be like, oh, some dude brought a Volkswagen Bug out here and they think they're going to compete, or a dune buggy or whatever they said. And I was like, a dune buggy? That thing is like the most incredible creation for this sport I've ever seen in my life, you know? So it's all in what you see, I guess, when you look at stuff, you know? And I was totally impressed by what I saw. And you know, John Nelson was there and everything. They wouldn't want to like share anything, right? They were very competitive. And that was that desert influence side that was, you know, there. And it makes me to this day still remember why King of the Hammers and 4400 or whatever you want to call it, or Ultra 4, I guess, not just our class. Every class has a different jam than like some of the desert stuff where in short course where it's like, you know, stay out of my pit. I don't want you to see what we're doing.
Yeah.
And, you know, that vibe, I think, is why our sport's grown to be what it is. We're welcoming to the guys that want to start. I mean, literally, we'll help anybody, you know? And I think that all started, in my opinion, with the Campbells, to the point where, you know, Shannon would say, I'll build you a car. I'll build you the same car. I'll sell you my car. I don't care. If we have the same junk, I'll still go out there and race you. And that attitude that, like, you know, I'm not cocky and I'm not going to protect all my trade secrets, but we're going to go out there and race and let's see who's better, is a way healthier way than, you know, we came up with something and we're going to put a you know, cover on the car every time you see it.
The sport tends to accelerate a lot faster when people work together.
For sure.
And that's one thing I love about Ultra 4, and I've been a part of it, I guess, since 2011, somewhere around in there is when I started really getting into the sport and actually talking to the racers and the drivers. That's when I started traveling with Derek West, of course. And he kind of got me into it. And then I ended up announcing for a few years at KOH. And the cool thing is if I had a media vest on or if I didn't, it didn't matter who you were. If you walked into their pit, and as long as they weren't knee deep in oil or whatever, doing whatever they had to do, they were willing to sit there and talk to you. They didn't care who you were.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I love about KOH, and I hope it never changes. I haven't been out to KOH in the past 3 years. I need to go back this year, which I'm kind of on the mission to try to make it that way. But so you ran Cal Rocks, you took the Donner, the Napa in 2002.
Yeah,
and I'm basically I'm looking at your website that you've got.
So Napa's a trip. The Napa event was an event that I just remember showing up and some guy looking at our Jeep, because it was literally a CJ5 on 35-inch tall tires, right? He's all, dude, you're not gonna make it through the course in that. And you know, that was from all the guys with like 44s and, you know, Rockwells and all that. And I was like, we'll see. You know, and I wasn't sure. You know, I was like, you might be right. We'll see. But, you know, we went on and we won that. That event was, that was the first rock race. That was before the XXRA days. That was before, you know, anyone decided they wanted to go fast to the rocks. And I always look back at that thing and I'm like, dude, that was the event. I don't think a lot of people saw it, but that was the event that the Kleins watched. And I think they were like, you know, Rich Klein, big
Big
And I
Rich.
think he was like, that's pretty cool. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't come until a little bit later that my buddies all wanted to go fast in the rock. So Tom Ways had a Trent Fab buggy, and my buddy Greg Hussey built a car in his garage, and they would get to the trail and they would just peel out. You know, they would literally drive through the trail as fast as they could, and people were like blown away. I mean, you got to remember, at the same time this is going on, guys are competing about how many like transfer cases they've stacked together from Marlin Crawler that they can go as slow as they can go. And so there's competitions about how slow your rig crawls. And we're going as fast as we can through the trail. And it's like polar opposites. And we're the hoodlums. So like we're out there and people are giving us the stink eye for driving fast. And I'm like, this is badass. Like, this is really, cool. Now I don't want to tear up anything on like, the lands and stuff like that. But it wasn't about that. It was just like, why does it need to take 2 days to get through the Rubicon Trail or something, right? Let's just go through it and then go camp and drink beer by the river, And you're like, yeah, what the hell's wrong with the whole Jeep crowd? So it wasn't bad. I still think there's a lot of fun to just throwing it in, granny low and crawling through the trail and everything, but it's a lot faster and more efficient just to roll through. So yeah, the cars are so much better now. It's just a different world, but that was the first of it. That was the first of all the go fast stuff. And it didn't take, more than 5 or 6 years, and it was starting to turn into something.
Yeah, you did Cal Rocks till looks like 2004, and then you moved on to Pro Rock and U Rock, and these are all cone dodging, correct? They're all cone dodging.
Correct.
Small stuff.
They're all cone dodging. A lot of things were going on. The rules obviously got really complicated, right? Stock mod, the rules opened up. Cody Wagner was competing with us. Like, there's a lot of guys that are still in it today.
Oh, Four Eyes.
There's a ton of guys.
Mr. Cody Wagner.
Yeah, he's a good dude. We all hung out with him because Lindsay was cool, but was this recorded? No, I'm kidding. No, he was great, and his dad was cool. We always had fun at the events with him and everything, and we'd go compete. It was good times because you're trying to win, and I think our highlight event, well, something happened, and that was a good Jeff Mello tie-in. So U-Rock was going on, and I had a car built by Scherer. It didn't really get done in time, so I didn't run a lot of the U-Rock events, but it wasn't a big deal. We did get to go up and win one of them in Fernley or something, or maybe that was a Cal Rocks event, but either way, in my new buggy, because I had Scherer build a buggy when the Jeep class kind of got turned into like too much of a buggy, and I didn't really want to cut my Jeep apart and make it a buggy.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was working, and I figured I could buy the buggy and keep my Jeep and have, something that I can keep nice instead of having to make it just destroyed all the time. And because I still wanted to go trail wheeling, right? So if you're competing in it and it's broken all the time, you can't do both. So I was like, what do I do here? And so I made that decision. And then U-Rock basically changed and said, look, we're going to have a pro class. And it's interesting because, I think we're kind of rolling up on a time in our series we'll end up with a pro class, but it has some downfalls, and I was one of the people who took the downfall. And he said, okay, you're going to be called a pro based on how you did last year in the series. And I was like, well, wait a second, I ran Cal Rocks. I could run any series. I was planning on running your series next year because now I got a car, but they wouldn't let me in. So I'm winning Cal Rocks events, but not able to run the U-Rock Pro Series because I didn't have the points to qualify. So Jeff Mello's like, dude, that sucks. I'm sorry. I don't have a buggy, but I qualified. I'm like, well, that seems like a perfect storm. Here, drive my buggy, prep it for me so I can run the Pro West or whatever they called it. No, the Western, like the amateur hour series, right? But it was still a lot of good dudes that just didn't make the cut because of the way they did their points. And then I'll get myself pointed into the U-Rock series for next year by doing that. So he ran with one livery. He had the Skyjacker deal. So he would basically reskin the car and prep it and go run in the U-Rock Pro Series. And then we'd skin it back for my stuff, and I would run the West. And so we did, and U-Rock and Pro Rock and all that. We were going 24 weekends a year, to events. So we did 24 events, and I mean, rock crawling was so much better, right? You bend a link here and there. You got to replace a power steering pump and change the oil every once in a while, air locker seals, stuff like that. But you weren't like doing what we're doing now, right? So the cars were lasting a little better. I mean, every once in a while you got to do some tube work when you make a mistake, but it wasn't like KOH prep where you're basically building a car every time you go out and run it. And so, that was a lot more fun for 24 weekends a year, but still a ton of hours of time behind the wheel, and they were Saturday, Sunday events. And it made us a little more hardcore because, you'd compete on Sunday until 5 o'clock. You jump in the car and we would drive sometimes 13, 14 hours and I have to be at work. And you're like, holy crap, I got to be able to do it all. And so it wore on you, but it made us, a little bit tougher, I think, for being able to prep cars and not be like worried about it, all that stuff that's come up when you're racing at the Hammers and all that, all the Ultra 4 races where they're a lot more work on the grind side of it than just the car, but it's good. So anyway.
Yep. But yeah, I noticed that you took Pro Rock Champion 2006, 2007, and then you went on to King of the Hammers champion. Oh, no, I take that back. I missed one. Baja 1000, class 17. What was your experience with Baja 1000?
My favorite day of racing is probably King of the Hammers win, but really before like the size of that, the most exciting day was when we had we didn't know it at the time, but it was the last ever U-Rock event, and it was in Farmington, Chokecherry Canyon. And we also had the Pro Rock event the same weekend. Well, Pro Rock was a Saturday, Sunday event.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't go on Saturday because the U-Rock race was on Saturday. It was a one-day event. The only time they ever did a one-day event, but it was a one-day event. And so we went out on Saturday. Well, first of all, Friday night, Lance Clifford was my spotter. My father-in-law, Steve-O, flew in. We partied in my race trailer, until 4 a.m, until people told us to turn our music off. Because we were singing it at the top of our lungs out in front of the truck, right?
That's
like
awesome.
all Oakland rap. We were hilarious back then, dude. We won, so we got up. We got up in the morning, 2 hours of sleep, and we won. And then on the last obstacle, we pulled the car into the trailer and drove from Farmington to Johnson Valley to Cougar Buttes. Jumped in there. We had missed the first day of the event. We still had enough points. We got into the final or whatever, and we won that. So we won an event we'd missed a day on. And I guess the first day was really hard, and everybody was like 40ing out on the courses and not finishing them. So we weren't that far behind in points. So we got there Sunday morning after being road weary, jumped in there, won the event. That gave us the championship. So I basically came home that night on Sunday night with 3 trophies. We almost died on I-5 on the way home because my father-in-law was driving and went into the center divide. And it was gnarly. Lance was sleeping in the trailer, and the trailer was sideways to the road, and the cabinets were open, and the shit was flying out of the cabinets, and he thought he was a goner. He's like, this is how I'm gonna go. He swears to this day there was a cow in the middle of the road, but there's no way. It was like an illusion from being up for 3 days. So we survived that one, and it was a pretty cool deal. But right after that, so Lance was getting to do some co-driving with Pistol Pete, and he had bought a Jeep Speed. We had been racing Jeep Speed for a couple of years, and me as his co-driver. It was a perfect trade. Like, I would co-drive for him in a race, and then he was spotting for me, and we were having so much fun together. Like, my wife hated us. We were just like wild banshees together, dude. We just partied so much and had so much fun, but we were living life, and we were having a great time with it. Mike Schaefer had a Jeep Speed, and I got to be part of that. They went down there. I don't know. It's pretty cool. They went down there and won 3 Baja 1000s in a row in Class 17. I got lucky to be part of one of them. And, in 2007, Lance was co-driving for Pistol Pete, and he said, dude, buy the seat. And because there's 2 seats, 2 passenger seats, and Pete sits in the middle on that 3-seat geyser truck. He's like, buy the seat. It's $5,000. It's so worth it. Do it. And I was like, oh my God. All right. So I bought the seat and got to ride in a trophy truck. And it's a great story, but, essentially, like, Pete and I solidified a friendship in that thing because, when you go to Baja and race together, like, you become brothers no matter what. But we had some stuff happening, and it worked out really good. Like, he was stoked on me, and I was pumped to be part of it. And we finished 4th in the trophy truck, which was cool. But it gave me, like, an education that you almost can't get until you go ride in a trophy truck for, 18 hours, and you're like, okay, I see what cars are capable of. Because before that, like, you're riding in a Jeep Speed, you're like, I can't believe these things don't break in half. But you have no idea what the trophy trucks are doing until you're in them. And, I'm sure I've driven them now. They're even further along than they were back then. But it gave me an idea. So then I rode with Jeff Mello 4 months later. So 2007 November is the Baja 1000. 4 months later is February. The Hammers for the 2008 King of the Hammers. I was the co-driver for Jeff Mello, and it was the opposite of a trophy truck, but it was everything I liked. Right? It was the rock side, but
Right.
we got to go to the desert. And I mean, there's no BSing about it. Everyone wants to race a trophy truck, right?
Right.
I just knew it was a pipe dream because, there was no way I was going to be able to afford to do it, especially not, with no sponsors and really no racing heritage that would ever work my way into it at that point. So when I saw King of the Hammers, I was like, dude, this is it. This is rock crawling and desert racing. It's everything I wanted to do. The technical side, the go fast side, it's all in one. And I was like, this is perfect. So I went to Shannon Campbell and I said, dude, I want to build a car with, lightweight axles, Spider Tracks, axles, and an LS7 that rips, and, build it light, but with, all the suspension. And at the time I wanted to be able to do rock crawling at the same time. And we tried, and it was the wrong car. It just wouldn't rock crawl. And then I went to the Hammers, and it really wouldn't go through the desert. So I turned around, I went back to Schaefer. He had a guy named Bill Coons, the guy that started Torchmate.
Mm-hmm.
Bill had purchased a Class 7 truck, and it drove really good. So we basically copied the rear suspension. Jesse Haynes helped. He was working around there at the time, and we cut the car apart that we had just finished and basically 3-linked the rear with a wishbone. I guess it's the right way to say it. We wishboned the rear. It's a 4-link, I guess, but it's a wishbone.
Gotcha.
And trailing arms, and it was good enough in the desert to go down there. I remember calling Todd at Fox, and I was like, dude, I need some bypasses and coilovers for the rear. And he's like, you're going to try to drive that thing through the desert? I was like, yeah. Come on, Todd. He's like, you got to buy them, bro. I can't help you out on that stuff. And I was like, all right. So we bought all the stuff, and I wouldn't say that in 2009 it was leaps and bounds better, but after the race we won in 2009, we won the 2009 race, and then I spent we went down there 11 times between that race and the next year, because there was no rock crawling really that we were going to do in that car, and there wasn't any other part of the series, right? They didn't really have an Ultra Force series at the time, so I raced a few races at Prairie City for the Vora stuff, but there was nothing else going on. So we got the car super good, and in 2010, we were really we were way fast, and we broke that wishbone, and it was just one of those deals where it wasn't meant to be, and then it just the car basically was good but not good enough to beat Shannon, and I kind of quit. I basically was like, all right, I raced 2011, and I knew, I just said, I had an event, right? There was a race with Shannon. Shannon and I, nobody ever knows this stuff, but Shannon and I raced after I got past kind of winch back door, and then from then on we had one lap left, and we raced as hard as we could, and my car basically couldn't keep up with Shannon. It was going into limp mode from overheating, and I lost a rear end, which I was losing them all the time because I had those diffs in there upside down, and nothing would just hold up to the abuse. And so when you get to the point where you're like, well, the car isn't capable of winning, and I can't afford to build a new car, you have a tough decision to make. You want to be a second, third, fourth place guy. I think we got into that mode where I was like, dude, I don't want to go if I'm not going to win. And that attitude has never changed. If I'm not capable of winning, it's not that appealing to go. And I don't want to sandbag and run a low end class or something either. I just want to go race the best of the guys and go do it, because that's the drive I have to race. And it's not ego thing. It's just, that's all that appeals to me. And
gotcha.
So
that makes sense.
Yeah. So I think, I don't know where we left off exactly right there, but no big deal. We basically, walked away from it, and I sold the car to a guy, and I always remember that day. It was one of the hardest days ever. I mean, I sold the car, good guy, right? And he bought it, and he was all stoked on taking it down there.
Didn't you sell it to Corey Kuchta? Is that right?
Okay, so yeah, I was going to mention him, but he didn't. I mean, he drove it, he raced it, and I don't think he bought the car. His boss bought the car.
Awesome.
And he was going to just take it down to the Hammers with his buddies for his New Year's or something trip. It was either New Year's or Thanksgiving or whatever. They went down there and just have the most badass buggy of all the guys that he goes down there with. And I think Corey drove it a few times, and he's all, dude, it's more than badass. This thing is incredible. And he started racing it, and he did great. He's dude, those guys are good fabricators, good guys. Really liked all of them, and so they built
Yeah.
some cool cars and stuff since then.
The one thing that I remember, I think Tom Kingston from Spider Trucks. Yeah,
Yeah.
he took a picture of Corey racing it at the Nationals. Not sure. I think it was at Miller Motorsports Park, and he took a picture, and it was just rolling like crazy. The old car was just.
I think it might have been a Lucas regional race or something. Yeah,
it was scary.
And the car was a little scary, right? It was like 095 wall, 1.5 inch tubing, and I mean that car was 2,950 pounds.
Jeez.
And it was one of those things where I was like, this car was designed when the sport was going 50 through the whoops, claiming we were going 60. And all of a sudden it was going 70 through the whoops, even though everyone claimed we were going 80. And I'm like, I don't think this thing's supposed to roll over at 70 miles an hour,
That was a scary shot. I still have that picture because I just saved it just because it was one where he was in the middle of the air and his hands are out and the window nets had broken off, and I was like, oh my gosh. And I didn't know that all, but luckily, I mean, Corey was good and everything else. So
well, he got lucky because the front end came down, and I think it ripped the front end out of the car and everything. But that energy that it took to, if it hadn't landed on those tires and side loaded the axle and everything, and instead it hit the cage, it might be a different, like, cool pick. You know what I mean? It might not be so cool. But I think that he was smart. He did kind of like what Eric Miller did when he bought Josham's car. He double pillared the C tube coming down, or the B pillar or something. I forget how he did it exactly, but he basically strengthened up the chassis there and made it a little safer for the environment. But I got a call right after that from Tom Allen. He goes, "Hey, Jason," and I always liked Tom, right? He's helped me with steering stuff over the years and everything. And I was going through parts, left and right, just trying to, the sport was developing and we didn't have it all figured out. And, we were guinea pig and stuff. And I just remember he calls me up and he goes, "Hey, so I built a car for Dean Bullock." But Dean's like, "Man, I don't want to prep a new car. The old car's perfect right now. I don't see the reason to go do it, but it's all built. You want to drive it?" And I'm like, "Well, what's the deal?" He's like, "You bring your helmet." I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds cool. How's the car?" Because I didn't want to go out there and be second place kind of car, who knows how far back. And he's like, "No, it's capable. It's got all the stuff." And I'm like, "Okay." Now, it wasn't far from my old car. It was just bigger and more horsepower and,
and IFS
components. Well, no, it wasn't IFS. It was the big white one.
Oh, no, this okay. Like I'm thinking behind. Yeah.
So we called it Whitey was what it got named or whatever. Adam Scherer was awesome, man. Ryan Donaldson and Adam and I had so much fun together, dude. It was the real roller coaster of life, though, like real racing, because we'd go out and we'd lead the race. Like we'd led a couple of races. We won some stuff in it. We got the pole at the Chupacabra 300 down in Texas against trophy trucks, and literally, like, we won the pole with Class 1 cars that race and score. I realize he's not the fastest, but Jesse James is a badass, and he had a full-blown Geyser trophy truck, and we beat him in the qualifying. I was like, that was cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but we led that race, and we had like a 12-minute lead in that race, which is ridiculous, right? Here's a 4,400 car smoking all these guys, and we blew up the motor. And it wasn't for anything we did. Just the motor started losing oil pressure, and there you go, right? Yep. So it was the ups and downs of racing, and we led the Ultra 4 race at Glen Helen, like a lap to go or 2 laps to go or something. It was on time, so it's hard to exactly figure out, but probably had to run another solid lap or something. And the rear axle housing just broke the weld on the hub, and hub fell off and dragged it around on 3 tires for about half a lap until the link started to come apart. And it was like, damn. So we had this the highest of highs. Like, we qualified on the pole for King of the Hammers, and then the next year I qualified last, right? Like, it was just up and down, up and down, up and down, and motor issues and you name it. And so we just had a rough road, but we built that car, and my IFS car, the one that went from me to Tom Ways to now Mike Boo. And I love that car. That car was like such a it was such a cool car because I called Roy at Pro-Am, and he said, yeah, send me the money. So we called him like over and over again with the money, and he wouldn't get back to us, and like literally wouldn't let us buy the front end that he had built for Shannon and everything. And I was like, damn, this guy's not going to get back to us, or he's not going to sell it to us. I can't figure out which one. So I was like, shit, we can do this. So we built it. And this kid named Dallas Lund, which is Tim Lund's son, was going to school at University of Oregon. He was learning SolidWorks. And I was like, hey, Tim called me and he's like, hey, are you building all this stuff yourself? And I was like, yeah, dude, I'm basically just going to cut it out on my bandsaw. And he's like, well, my son will draw up all the stuff. If you want to show him what you want, he'll draw it up in SolidWorks and we can get it all water jet. And I was like, really? So we went through, and I'm glad we did, because instead of hand making everything, it was all perfect. Everything fit perfectly, and the kid was awesome, right? And he's gone on to do way better stuff. He got a job with Nike. I mean, he literally made like the FIFA soccer ball. Like, the dude is solid and is super badass.
Yeah,
and he really like went a long ways and stuff. But
Tim and Dallas are good people, man. I'm good friends with Tim. I've been out with him for a while, and that's a Wild West Motorsports IFS front end that you got, and it's proven, dude. It works well.
Oh, that car was as nimble as any car ever. And then all we did on my new car was just, basically copied it, but made a couple of changes that I wanted to make. And I think a lot of times people think we had a ton of money and we were in this sport and we had all this shit. It's like, dude, we couldn't even afford to buy the CVs until like we had gotten the car done. And when I got the outer CV, which was it's called a Rosepa, right? It's non-plunging. I was like, damn, they turn way farther than the internet said they did. And so I hadn't even gotten the car on its own tires yet. And I already knew I could build a better car before we were done with it, which is a tricky thing because I knew I could make it steer tighter. And, the way I designed it, it would only go about 32 degrees. And so I was like, okay, for the next one, right, shelf that for now, but keep working on this one. And like I said, that car was super cool. And Tom decided to focus on his son's racing career, so he bowed out of the sport and sold the car, and I didn't have the money to buy it at the time. And then we had a good run, but we didn't have the success maybe in the finishes that we should have had.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you honestly, that was probably one of those years in racing where I was never tired on the drive home from the track, no matter where we were in the country, because my frustration level was so high that I literally could retrack every step that caused the failures and try to figure out how to make them better. And I'd show up at my door. I'm like, damn, I'm home already, because I was so intense about it, and it was the ultimate frustration. Like it's brutal to be in that position, and they were like transmission issues, and they're only so brutal because we were leading the race, right? We led like I think every race that season, if I recall correctly, and broke every time. Yeah. And I mean, there's part of you that thinks maybe you're like, a joke because you can't seal the deal. But I knew I wasn't driving the car too hard. I knew I wasn't making any mistakes. Like, it wasn't like I was hitting stuff and ripping arms off. I was losing transmissions like over and over and over. And the guy's like, I've never seen a band wear out like this. Like, you're downshifting it at too high RPM. And I'm like, I'm not even downshifting it at that high RPM. Like, I'm being so gentle to it. I'm lifting between every shift, and I'm never like doing anything I can. I'm not doing anything to this transmission. And, as it turned out, it was one bad part. We had bought a 300M input shaft for the transmission, and it was out around by like 40 thousandths, and it would just pound the bushings out of the transmission. Like, the transmissions were junk that were coming out of it. And finally, we got a new guy. It's actually the guy that helped Dennis Reed build the Reed case and everything. Mm-hmm. And he put that shaft on his lathe when he was getting ready to check everything. He's like, oh my God, this thing's junk. And I'm like, no, that thing's 300M. It's badass. And he's like, no, this thing is junk. It's completely bent. And I was like, oh my God, that is the one part that is carried over through like 3 transmission cases, 4 drum, like everything. And it caused all the issues. But it's good to find it. It's just frustrating season because we had so many wins that were taken away from us, like
right.
Brutal, right? Or the sport would have a lot different, set of things, but that's racing and that's how it works. So, I accept that and everything, but it was frustrating. And then sort of sad events, but I took the most out of them that I could. It wasn't easy, but my mom passed away, and she had $100,000 in her thing that she gave my brother and I. So we got $50,000 a piece. And I sat there and I looked at it and I'm like, what should I do with this? And like, there's part of you, it's like, I should invest this. I should do something nice for the kids, put it in their college fund, do something. And I was like, I woke up and I was like, dude, she'd want me to do something that, chase a dream, do something with it, not just sit on it. So I made the decision to build the car, and I didn't have time. It was like probably November 25th that I made that decision. She passed away like a few days before that.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't have a car. Mom was out of the sport, and there was no way I was going to be able to pull it, right? Like there's no way you can build a car between then and the hammers and have it done when you haven't even like started the idea of getting it built. So about that time, Lance Clifford's car wasn't finished that he had built. Well, actually, he hadn't built it, but Dan Trout had built. And so I was like, hey, Lance, if I get your car finished out, can I race it? So 2014, we raced Lance Clifford's car. And dude, it was actually a badass car. It had some tuning issues in the computer, so we didn't qualify super well. But we started around 25th or something, and we moved all the way up to the front of the pack and that thing pretty quickly. And unfortunately, just, like I said, lack of prep, it lost like some parts in the front end, like the CVs or something, had no grease in them at all. So it wasn't their fault. But they just failed the first time we touched a rock in the car. And the first time we touched the rocks in the car, it had no 4-wheel drive, basically. I was like, okay, those things smoked themselves across the desert before we ever got to the trail. So we were broken at the beginning of Aftershock.
Wow.
And that was definitely the worst Ultra 4 race like we ever had. We didn't even make it a lap down there. But anyway, built the car.
You went all the way from that to you built a new car, and it was a 1-seater, and then you changed it to a 2-seater. Can you explain why you did that?
So it's super cool because, like, I was building this car in my head while we're at the Hammers, and we played with the layout. Dallas was super cool because he was really good with SolidWorks, and we had built it originally as a front. I wanted to build basically a Pro 4. Ironically, it was almost identical to the Red Dragon.
Gotcha.
And then at the last minute, I was like, if I build it with the rear engine setup, I could put a passenger seat in it. But I don't want to do that right now because I don't think that's the best car for the sport. And it wasn't at the time. The sport didn't need a guy hopping out and winching 3 or 4 times during the race because you had tire balls. You weren't going up back door every time. The trails were getting easier. The race wasn't that long. And so all in all, the single seat setup made sense. And if, I wanted low center of gravity, so I put the radiator where the passenger was. I mean, there was nothing that was mounted in that car, above the dashboard. And like, we knew where the center of gravity was in the car. So every time we were adding something, we we're always trying to make sure we're adding it below the center of gravity line. Like, whatever it was, I just wanted it down and low. And it ended up being a car with like no polar moment. It was a little twitch, but it was fun when we got done with it. And then, the rules changed. The car was quick. Like it won poles and it was fast.
Yeah, you always hit on pole. I can always say that you were always on pole, but keep on going. I'm sorry.
No. Dude, it's just one of those things where I was like, yeah, that fast and good pole positions doesn't equate to, trophy rooms full of trophies. So, we were having little bugs and things like sort of out of your control. You're rolling the jackhammer, the trails just packed up with cars and stuff. You're like, okay, you make some mistakes with little things, but every one of the steps, and this is like my favorite thing, is every one of those little steps like that went wrong has turned out to be, we've turned it around to be something good. The radiator cap kind of failed on the car in 2015. And I was like, dude, there's got to be a better way. So I went and looked, like, why do we have radiator caps on these things? Like, how dumb is it that a radiator cap for $12 can take you out of the race because it's not staying sealed? And so I was like, So I found this company, CNR Racing, and they make a pressurized radiator system that doesn't have a cap, so you don't have to worry about it losing fluid. And it keeps pressure on the cylinder heads and all this stuff with water, so you're not boiling in your heads and stuff. And I'm like, this is badass. So I buy one and we put it in the car and it works great. and we're continued racing success. The next thing you know, CNR is sponsoring us and taking care of all of our coolers, and I'm working with them on marketing stuff and getting them into new distributors and everything. You're like, this is cool. Like, this is the part of racing that's rad. You know what I mean? Um, and all those sponsorships from all the stuff have grown because of developing products and showing people like what we're doing, which it doesn't happen in a lot of the other sports because they're afraid to let everyone know what they're doing. But like those little things are what we're always trying to take away. So anytime I have a parts failure, like you'll never hear me blame the manufacturer. You'll never hear me blame, because it always comes back down to you. Like, you chose that part, you're running that part. You got to know what it's good for, what its lifespan is. Like, Adam that came on in 2017, Adam McGow, my crew chief, he's like incredible, because what I lacked in like mechanical ability, he makes up for 100 times, and he's so sharp and his mind is so good about the proper thing. Like, he knows what needs to be done, and so he's always trying to get us there. And ever since he came aboard, like, he's basically, I mean, there's been times where he told me I was zip tying shit wrong and like quit zip tying stuff. And I'm like, damn, dude, I literally am not allowed to work on my car. So, he's awesome. And I think that, he took us to that level to where the car was finishing the races. Like, we might have been able to drive it. The car might have been good enough, but we weren't getting the finishes. And, it's Adam is the reason that we've been getting there. And so, but it takes all sides. And that whole thing came together because we went down to Baja to do a deal with, the Class 11 car with Rugged Radios and JT Taylor and, just a group of guys. We went all down there and tried to race that Class 11 car. And Adam showed up on his own dime to come down from Ohio and wanted to see the Baja and do the whole thing. And the next thing you know, we hit it off down there, and he moved into a camper in my backyard for 6 months, and we worked on race cars until he got his own place out there. And, now he's like my best friend and works on the car with me and stuff. So it's crazy how it all goes together like that. But,
yeah,
that's the cool part of racing, is getting to do all this crazy stuff and the friendships along the way.
Well, yeah, very much. And honestly, you usually just follow the west coast of Ultra 4, correct?
Yeah, those few years with Tom Allen, I got to go back and do Roush Creek and races. I actually took this car and did that one in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and that was so cool. I was super bummed when they didn't have that race, but I know it'll come back someday maybe. But it's just I'd love to do them all, and I think maybe people don't understand that. I'd like to do them all.
Yeah,
I just can't. I can't pull it all off.
well,
I've got
financially, and not to mention you can't be in two places at one time, which I'm amazed at the people that are able to do both of the series and all that. It amazes me.
I actually, I don't know that I made the right choice all the time. I don't know that I ever had an opportunity to jump off. I never got the sponsor that said, hey, if you go full time, or I never asked either. And that's maybe my fault. I never asked them, hey, if I go full time at this, can you guys step up so I can do the whole series? And I'm a little jealous of the fact that some of the other guys did. And I think it's going to really work out for them. Like, they made the commitment to it and they deserve the reward. And I mean that about Lauren, mostly in that comment. I respect the shit out of him. And,
what?
He went for it, and I think he's going to reap the reward right now, because I think the OEM side that's going to come into the sport is going to be huge. And there's nobody that deserves it more than the guys that put their heart and soul into it and committed to it, because I didn't take the leap of faith, and I don't deserve it as much as they do, even if, even if we've got some wins here and there, then they don't there and there and everything. It has nothing to do with that. He's been a full-time guy and he deserves it. And Shannon likewise, like having the monster deals and all the deals they've got, like they deserve those. They put their heart and soul into it. And here we're like a hobbyist racer. Know?
But yeah, and what really funny, I did a podcast with Levi a few months ago, and I asked him what his full-time job was, and he said racing. And I was like, I should have just not said a word about it, but oh well. But yeah, Levi's full-time racing, Lauren's full-time racing, Shannon, I would say for the most part is full-time racing. But that brings us back to how you were able to afford the racing that you're doing right now. What do you do for a day job, man?
Well, it's evolved quite a bit. I am definitely one of those people who has been in a lot of industries that have kind of maybe not continued. So when I was my grandfather too, right? My grandfather had a cigarette vending machine route, and cigarette machines are like gone off the face of the planet, right? So my dad had worked for that cigarette vending machine, and they bought a jukebox route and all that, and then he quit his job and started his own company, which is what we run today. And it's small, but what we did was we did pay telephones and vending machines and video games.
Really?
And the pay telephone thing obviously fell off, but in the meantime, we were busting it, right? I was the installer. I went out and poured concrete at one location and then go to the next location and run the conduit and climb the telephone poles and run the wires of the phones and run all the electrical. And I absolutely loved it. I had myself and a couple of friends and from college, and we basically would go out and install payphones and get contracts. I'd sell the contract at the liquor store to get the guy to switch over, or a gas station. And I went from that to like going to the airports, and I got San Francisco Airport, San Jose, and Sacramento. I got all the airports around us and put in all the phones, and they were doing great for years. And then that business just died off, obviously, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we bought jukeboxes, and then we went out and hustled in the bars, getting the bar owners to switch over to us, and then maybe buying the competitor. Like I bought about 13 competitors out from the industry that because I learned how to grow it and scale it from the payphone side, because we had a couple thousand payphones at one point, and then we got to 600 jukeboxes in the bars at every bar in the Bay Area. But I was also growing the management side, which was doing the vending machines. I had contracts at Costco and Family Dollar, doing ATMs and all these different things, and now I'm doing more ATMs. And lately it's been this new stuff with self-checkout kiosks for food service. So we're doing employee break rooms where we've got 150 or more employees in a place, and we'll put in a full, like, it looks like a mini market that we put inside it. It's got a self-checkout kiosk. You go up there, stick your thumbprint, it's got a biometric reader on it, and it charges your account, and you get the products that you want: fresh sandwiches, salads, any kind of drinks, coffees, whatever. And so it's just constantly evolving, but we are literally constantly hustling for that business. And I've got a great group of people that have been with us. I mean, some of my employees have been around for 20 plus years. Good sales guys that are really high quality. Like we're not a BS company, not a fly by night guys. We're not huge, but we do a really good job of what we do. It's a service business, so it's a little tricky because you got to rely on everybody when you go out of town for these races. And like the Hammers has been hard because you're gone for 12 to 14 days, and it's like I'm the guy that's up at 5:30 in the morning working on emails, and at 10 o'clock at night working on them to try to keep the business stuff rolling. And then we got to go out and pre-run the course and do all that stuff, right? But it's like everyone's like, "Oh, you never party with us in the pits, and you never do all this shit." I'm like, "God, dude, I don't have time," So it's tricky, but it's not like I don't want to,
Well, and you have a family as well.
Oh yeah.
One kid or two?
2 kids. I got my daughter is 11, and she's super into horses, and she's as passionate about the horse stuff as I am about racing. And I don't mean it like she loves it. She's totally entrenched in it. It's all she looks at on YouTube. It's all she writes about in her school papers. It's all she does when she's wake her up at 6:30 to go muck and feed the horses, and she gets ready for school, and then she comes home and she cleans them and rides them and puts everything away and drags the arena. And it's like she's into it. But I watched her go to the horse competition, and I kind of went there passively, like, yeah, we're at this horse event, and all of a sudden I saw in her the game face where I was like, oh shit, this is the same thing that happens to me when the helmet goes on. It's like, okay, it's time to do work. So everything she's practicing for, she puts out there, and then she goes out and wins, and she's like, so like she's got that same thing. Like she wins, and she's like, okay, I got this, and she's like, I want to go to this event, I want to go to this one. I'm like, that's an A series event. She's like, I want to go to the A series events and start doing that. And I'm like, okay, but you might not do well. I don't want you to get sad. She's like, I don't care how I'm going to do, I want to see how I judge up when I need to learn. I'm like, okay. So she's into that. My son's 6. I've never seen anybody ride a dirt bike more than my son at 6. Like literally, I've never seen anybody ride more hours a day than him. He is in love with dirt bikes, so I've got a lot of fun with him coming up, because I've already had fun with him, and I can't wait for him to be able to ride some of the little bit more aggressive trail stuff that I like to go do. So there's a lot beyond racing that I'm looking forward to in life. So no matter what happens with it all, like I'm stoked to be able to spend time with them. And this was probably not what everyone expected for me not to race the rest of the year this year because, of a couple of reasons. But man, it's been the most fun year of my life. Like winning KOH and doing it back to back. I think like nobody's like, hey, if you don't go to the next event, like we're going to pull your sponsorship for next year. So I don't have any of those constraints because I mean, I'm still good with all those guys. Everybody's happy with me. I didn't agree ahead of time to race the series and not race it. I just agreed to race KOH. And, then with the kids, I've never had more fun. And I spent as much time as I could with them this summer. And, I loved it. I actually loved it way more than I thought I would. I know it sounds weird, but I always felt like if I wasn't racing, I might be missing out. And I mean, this sounds awful, but I never even followed the live feeds. Like I wasn't even sure. I didn't know sometimes until I'd see the posts on Facebook that there was a race that weekend because I was just hanging out with them and happy to be with them. I wasn't feeling like I wish I was somewhere else.
That's
and
that's
I
awesome.
didn't expect that.
That is completely awesome that you take the time to do that. And I guess next race will be King of the Hammers.
Well, actually, I'm racing in the Baja 1000.
Nice, very cool.
So it's a little top secret still, but really, 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 really like cool. So it's weird, I didn't really know Cameron Steele that well. He's announced our events for a few years, so
right.
He kind of knows who we are, and I know who he is for all the years of him being a television personality and a racer. And I always respect. I mean, class 16 is such a cool class. I always followed it because it's like the raw, really good drivers class, and like watching him go out and win in the buggies and everything in the short course, and watching him like develop and like be a good driver. And then I don't know, something happened last year when he came in second at the 1,000, and I watched those videos and I was like, damn. And then when he won it this year, it was like, dude, the guy's got so much drive. Like he's so badass, but he's so personable and easygoing that sometimes I think people don't realize that he's got that like hardcore moto passion to like do it all right. And we just became friends, like fast friends, without like really spending as much time together as it usually takes. But we had like a common bond, and he has carried me to help me get to be part of his team to race in 1,000. And I was like, this is incredible. And it's not in the trophy truck. I'll just let you know, it's in another vehicle, but at least, the opportunity is there to go down and race it. And I've done it, I think 7 times. So this will be our 8th time. I got to do trail and missions, take the whole family down there. And that was all Cameron and BF Goodrich and Method and Fox that allowed me to do it. It's not racing, but it's still, good for, the sport in a lot of ways. I know it sounds funny, but like they get a lot of exposure out of it. And I think our group gets a lot of exposure out of it as well for Ultra 4 because, we're not necessarily just another desert racer that's going down there, but we're actually from a different discipline. And I really enjoyed it. God, I love Baja, and I love the off pace, like pre-running when you're down there going and exploring. I think exploring is kind of my next thing someday. Like I want to, Tom Ways and I nicknamed it Raptoring. When you get a Raptor and you go out and adventure places that you haven't been,
right?
It's it's kind of like the first time you rode a dirt bike trail and you're like learning a new single track that you're like, this is sick. It's that same feeling, but you're out in the Raptors and you got the AC seats on and listening to radio, XM or Sirius radio, whatever, and a little more peaceful. But it's definitely just as fun, and I really love it. And it's cool because my wife loves it. And so I can see us going out and having a lot of fun doing that. I didn't really get into overlanding or any of that kind of stuff. It wasn't really my jam. But the Raptoring is fast-paced enough that it's still, hits that adrenaline side that you want to have some fun and go out and explore. So trail missions was, absolutely badass.
Man, that's awesome. You're going to be down 1,000 and doing that kind of stuff. Being a back-to-back Ultra 4 King of the Hammers, the first back-to-back winner, and then also the 3-time. What's your thought on the next years of KOH? What are you hoping happens, and what is your plan for the next years of Ultra 4 and KOH?
Well, it's a great question because it's not like, what are your thoughts? Like, how are you going to do it again? It's like, what's going on with what's going on with KOH is I personally believe that what we watched happen in the side-by-sides with the manufacturers getting behind the side-by-side racers and supporting it because they have actual vehicle sales. I know Fox gets actual shock sales because they're branding out there. I know BF Goodrich gets actual tire sales because they prove they're the best tire out there. All those companies see a return on investment or they wouldn't be sponsoring these events. I think that the OEM side is going to come into Ultra 4 and into KOH and say, hey, this is one of the, if not the coolest events that takes place in the country. And we want to go out there and show that our stuff's the best. That competition between those OEMs is going to take our sport to the next level that it needs to be and help those professional drivers get to the spot where they're not, basically breaking even to try to go race, but they can actually go out and make a living doing it and take the cars to the level that they should be, because the OEMs are the guys that can help us with the engineering that we've, been doing on a shoestring budget and get the cars to the level where, they'll be better than what they're at today in no time. And, they'll be a really cool, era of the rock sports where it just blows up. And I think the story of Ultra 4 is probably still yet to be written when you look at what's going to happen over the next 5 or 10 years with that. And if I was those OEMs, it's the perfect place to market, because where else are you going to go get 70 to 80,000 people to show up that are diehard? I mean, there's nobody out there that shows up and they don't have some sort of an influence into the sport, and they're just the guys that are hardcore enough to go stay in the desert for that week. Think of all the people that want to go do that will be influenced by that group of people. So if you really look at it from a marketing standpoint, it's the 100% perfect demographic of the people they're looking for.
Right.
And they've got it all in one spot. So
right.
If I'm going to build a new OEM vehicle to go target that business, or I have one currently that I think is the best one, I'm damn sure going to be in that sport to make sure I can stay relevant and stay up there and or break ground with my new product and show everybody else, look at what we got. And I think it's going to turn into it's going to be like the auto show for off-road. People are going to want to go there to see all the new cool shit. And I mean, that's coming, and that's coming right away. So
yeah, very good.
It's cool. I think the next year is going to be awesome.
Yeah. And the cool thing is, whenever I've been there, they had I think the last year I was there was 2014. And I would love to go back this year to actually see, because they used to have a small tent of vendors, but their tent just continues to grow. And
it's sold out already, and it's like 5 months before the race.
Yeah, no, it's crazy, man. I love KOH. I've always done it on a bare bones budget, and this year, if I do it again, I'll do it a little bit different. Hopefully, I won't be staying in a trailer with gas tanks and everything else where I couldn't have AC or a heater and all that mess. But it is what it is. I'm working on it. I'm trying to get there. So, but
one now. All right, man. Well, thanks for everything. I appreciate being on, and hope we didn't ramble too much, man. I know these shows are probably a little long when I go into all the details, but it's definitely that's a lot of cool stories that bring back a lot of memories. So I enjoy telling them when we get a chance.
No, and honestly, I was supposed to talk about your brother. He told me he said he needed to be plugged, so you need to talk to Casey Scherer.
Well, you should have him on the show, dude. Casey's got quite a racing heritage too. I don't know if everybody knows how good he was in the go-karts.
Yeah, no, I've already had him on the podcast before, and
okay, cool.
And he told me, he said, man, make sure you plug me. So I got to make sure I plug Casey Scherer. Look at his go-karts. He's doing really good in the side-by-side industry right now. He's doing massive things. And now, and the other question is, which I asked him, and I'm going to ask you real quick: do you guys ever compete against each other?
No. It's been a little hard for me because I've had a couple of opportunities to race the ATVs, and it's a little tricky because it's a day extra pre-running the course. But I chose not to because I don't want to get into his thing. I would be happy if he came in mine, but I don't want to get into his thing and take that away from him, because I respect the effort he's put into his stuff, and I just don't think it's fair if I show up in there.
Right.
But likewise, I think I'm sponsored by Floral Parch, owned by Polaris. One of my best buddies is sponsored by Can-Am, and so is my brother. And I get these deals offered to me, and I think if the right deal came along to where I could carry him with me, we could be good teammates, because even though he doesn't listen to anything I say, it doesn't mean that we couldn't work together in a constructive way. I mean, I'm joking when I say that. He does listen to me. He just sometimes has to tell me that I'm wrong about 3 times before he listens. And sometimes I am wrong, so I'll take credit for being wrong every once in a while. But, I think if we could put an intermediary like Adam between us and say, okay, Adam, you tell Casey what he's going to go do to his car instead of me telling him that you can't run an electric water pump hanging off the side of the car, but, he'll be fine. He won't blow up his motor,
Oh, that's
but
funny.
I told him and I didn't want to listen. So, it's one of those things where, if we had the right structure, we could do a lot of fun stuff together. And,
yeah,
what people forget about my brother is he's a badass rock crawler. He's got a Bronco that I built with him in high school, and he's had a Bronco since he was 14 years old.
Yeah, the yellow one, right?
Yeah, and the dude can wheel. So he keeps going to the Hammers, and his car breaks in the desert before he gets to the rock trails. And I'm like, shit, you've never shown your capabilities yet because you keep getting, bad qualifying. The motor's not running right. Like literally, like it's all these little things. And I'm like, dude, somehow if you can just get, if he can just get a car that'll let him carry himself into the top 15 in qualifying without having any mechanicals, he can go out there and give Guthrie a run for his money because he can wheel the rocks.
Right.
And
so, yeah, that's funny.
We'll
it's funny. I was just giving you a hard time about that, and he told me to do that. I just talked to him earlier this evening. So,
cool.
Man, thanks for doing the podcast. I appreciate it. Man, you've got a pretty substantial winnings in Ultra 4 and racing it all, and I appreciate you sitting down and giving me an hour. I mean, considering you're sitting in Canada, and took the time out to do it, so I appreciate it, man.
Yeah. Hey, anytime, man. I'm glad to be on the show, and just working is working. Wherever I am, if I'm in a hotel room at night, there's nothing to do. I'm happy to take the time, but it's definitely it's the grind. I think, like I said earlier, it's not easy to do it all, but you got to pick your things, and sometimes I wish I was just racing full time, but it's a nice balance because I don't have to worry about the next SEMA show and getting my sponsorship deal renewed like some guys do, and I get a little cushion on it, but it's overall life's good and I'm happy with it. So appreciate being on the show, and if you can make it out to KOH this year, definitely come hang out.
Oh, we definitely will, man. We'll holler at you later, man.
All right, take care, Alan.
All right, guys, thanks for coming back and listening to the whole podcast. My name is Hitch. I'm with See You on the Trail, and if you haven't ever heard of us, please look us up on Facebook, YouTube. We are on Twitter and Instagram. It's See You on the Trail. Don't skip any spaces. Just spell it out. And we've been around since 2007. And we've done everything from King of the Hammers to Vegas to Reno to a lot of dirt riots to a lot of Ultra 4. So check us out. We've got a whole bunch of content on YouTube that we like to show off. We enjoy there. So check us out on YouTube and everything else. I do want to tell you one other thing. I'm looking to go to KOH. And if I go to KOH, I need to basically make sure that I'm paid to go there for the simple fact is I can't afford it because I'm a cheap bastard. I want to do full out documentaries on 5 racers at KOH. It doesn't matter if you're a 4,500, 4,600, 4,700, 4,800, 4,400 car. I need 5 guys. If I can get 5 teams to commit to me to do documentaries on them, and this will include it cannot include aerial footage. I have a drone, but it cannot include that because of the restrictions that they have there at the Hammers during it. But it will include GoPro footage. It will include interviews. It'll include what you guys are doing in the pit. Depending on how you actually want to do it, we can have some backstories and some gag reels and such. And then I will also take care of your social media moderation during that week, so you don't have to deal with it. I know a lot of guys, you're way overwhelmed at KOH trying to race a race, and I would love. I'll take over your social media moderation. I'll take the pictures. I'll update everybody on social media, because there's so many people that don't make it out to KOH that want to be there, but they're always listening and they're always watching, and they want you to succeed. And for you to succeed is also to have social media and make sure everything happens. So anyway, I'm willing to put that up to you guys. If anybody's interested in it, shoot me an email. seeyouonthetrail@gmail.com. You're also welcome to text me. Send me a message on my personal Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, anything. Let me know. But I hope you enjoyed the podcast today. We're going to try to have another podcast done in the next couple of weeks. This is really, to be honest, it's not a priority for me, for the simple fact is it's really hard to put these together and make sure everybody is on the same page and we all have a good conversation. I do love the long form conversation that we end up having, but everybody's planning for nationals. My next podcast, I believe I'm going to try to get a guy that's got a monster truck. He's been racing mega trucks for years. He bought a monster truck, and he's been doing that. I think October 19th, I believe he's going to successfully, hopefully, do a backflip. So I got to call him and make sure that we've got that set up, and we'll bullshit and have a good time. But anyway, guys, check out all of our social media. That's how you keep up with us. Facebook is the main one. Instagram's there. Twitter's there. And then also Facebook's the main one. I'm not even going to fool you because I love Facebook. I've been on Facebook since 2008 or something like that. So, but yeah, go find us. It's See You on the Trail, no spaces. Just spell it out. See You on the Trail. There's no algorithms or anything like that that'll be a problem. So, and guys, I hope you enjoy this podcast, and we'll have a good day. We will have a good day, but I hope you have a better day. My name's Hitch, and we're with See You on the Trail. Have a good night.